So if we wanted to start off with I feel like you can describe what you do and who you are a lot better than I could. This is a very impressive person that we have in front of us today. So I think I might just pass it off to you, William, to introduce yourself and get started. And I can give you sharing access, share screen access.
Could you pin his camera as well?
Yes, good point.
Great. Let me know when you shared access. Can you all hear me okay? I'm getting a little bit of feedback on my end. That may just be me.
We can all hear you. We can hear you just fine.
Okay, great. So I can dive in. Really good to be with you all today. I was excited when Cameron offered the opportunity to come and speak with you all. I'm always so inspired when I see, the next and current kind of generation of environmental leaders, really just being in space and sharing space with folks like you all. So I'm William J. Barber III. I'm an environmental climate justice scholar and advocate. I have nearly a decade of social justice organizing experience in a number of issues, including voting rights, racial justice, and economic justice. But I tell folks my first love has always been environmental justice organizing. A little bit about me, my background. I received my bachelor's of science in environmental physics from North Carolina Central University. And I earned my Juris Doctorate from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill School of Law. So you all will forgive me for that. Go Heels. But there I focused on energy law and environmental law and policy. Currently, I work as the director of climate and environmental justice at the Climate Reality Project, which is a nonprofit based in Washington, D.C., whose mission is to catalyze a global solution to the climate crisis. We work very heavily on educating communities and lay people on the science behind the climate crisis, on the opportunities for policy solutions, as well as engaging them in our Climate Reality Network, which consists of over 42,000 trained climate leaders worldwide, 100 domestic chapters, and 12 international branches. I'm also a member of the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality Secretary's Environmental Justice Advisory Board, and co-chair for the North Carolina Poor People's Campaign Ecological Devastation Committee. More recently, I founded Rural Beacon Initiative, LLC, which is a startup based in Durham, North Carolina, that provides consultation for groups looking to advance equity, climate justice, and environmental justice in their programming. Rural Beacon works at the intersection of three issues, including consultation, working with firms to skill up their internal staff capacities on the history of environmental justice, those skills that I just mentioned, equity, climate justice, and environmental justice in their programming, and also finding opportunities to creatively and innovatively incorporate elements of climate justice in future solutions. Our second body of work includes networking and strategic convening, where I really look to, I believe in being a bridge builder. And I really believe that in the crucible of thought between community advocacy and climate innovation, we get our best solutions. So we work to get climate and environmental justice activists from communities in the same room as climate financiers, climate technologists, people who are thinking very heavily about climate solutions. So we make sure that as we address the climate crisis, as we seek solutions that lower GHG emissions, we are also getting the best of community benefit. And then finally, we work with deployed projects, two of which include our Vera Brown Farm Sustainability Hub and our Prices Fund that we'll talk a little bit more about in later on with Piedmont Business Capital and Optimum Technology Corporation, through which we try to provide clean products for BIPOC households, women, businesses, and communities, low-income communities that have traditionally been locked out of the clean energy economy. Just a little bit about me. And Cameron, is this facilitated or do you just want me to dive right in?
This is not facilitated. I was just hoping you could dive right in.
Okay,
So,
great.
Does anyone have any questions about William's work before we dive into very helpful for y'all want to briefly introduce it? I know we can't see you, but maybe if you can shout, we can get a sense for who you're talking to and so that if you want any names and your program really quickly. I'm looking at Christina live. I have no right.
Hi, I'm Christina. I'm a senior environmental science major in Psychmeyer, and I'm from Durham.
Hi, I'm Ariel. I'm a junior environmental science major in Minor, and I'm from Dallas, Texas.
Hey, I'm Victoria. I'm a sophomore. I'm from Elkridge, Maryland, and I'm majoring in international comparative studies and Spanish.
Hi, I'm Megna. I'm a sophomore from Northern Virginia. I'm undecided on my major, but thinking about international comparative studies and environmental science.
Hi, my name is Maya Wilson. I'm from Gaithersburg, Maryland. I'm a second-year master's student in local health.
Hi, I'm Betsy Albright. I'm faculty at the Nicholas School, originally from Indiana. I've been in Durham for a while. Thank you for joining us.
And I'm Erica Weisel, faculty also at the Nicholas School Department.
I'm Madeline. I'm a sophomore, and I am majoring in political science and I'm from Greensburg.
I'm Laura. I'm also majoring in science. I'm sophomore from Spanish. Hi, I'm Megan. I'm a sophomore. I'm majoring in history, and I'm from Durham.
I'm Erin. I'm a junior from Wilmington, North Carolina, and I'm doing a program too about. I'm Sophia. I'm a senior. I'm also in program too called social justice. I'm originally from Indianapolis.
I'm Sasha. I'm a second year master's of international student, and I'm from Baltimore, Maryland.
To our Zoom participants, I can just call people. I mean, I'm here for so much.
Sorry, I didn't quite hear the tail end of what you just said. I think you may have asked me to introduce myself. Is that correct? Okay. Hi there, my name's Amina. I'm a senior here at UNC Chapel Hill, go Heels. And I'm studying public policy with minors in environmental justice and data science. And I hail kind of from two cities in North Carolina, but grew up right outside of Charlotte, North Carolina, and have ancestral connections to Manteo, North Carolina.
Great.
I'm going to turn my camera on for introductions, but I'm having a little bit of Wi-Fi trouble. So, so far, like having that off has helped with connectivity and hearing you. My name is Tasha. I use they, them pronouns. I transferred into Duke, so I'm a second semester junior right now. I am from Asheville, North Carolina. That's where I grew up. And what's my major? I'm majoring in African American history and documentary studies. So that's me.
Hattie?
Hi, I'm Hattie. I'm from Chapel Hill, North Carolina. I'm a junior and I'm studying psychology and public policy.
Ryan.
Hello, my name is Ryan. I'm a second year MEM at the Nicholas School, and I'm from Los Angeles.
Great.
You know who I am. So.
Great. Well, again, so good to share space with you all. Did I skip anyone? Did we skip anyone? No. Okay. So I'm just going to dive in. Let me share my screen. Here, can everyone see that? Yep. Okay. Let me see, slideshow. So I really, just wanted to have a quick conversation. Some background, as you all see, I'm really passionate about the work of climate and environmental solution, but specifically through a lens of equity environmental justice and climate justice. And those are not all the same things, as we will talk a little bit about. My passion really comes from being a native of Eastern North Carolina. So I grew up in Goldsboro, North Carolina, small town about 2 hours, hour and a half from Durham. And early on, I had two very distinct but related experiences. The first experience being a son of the South, being a self-described country boy to everyone I talked to, I really grew up with an appreciation for communities that have deep connections to land. So being in a rural area, an area that many may look at as or label a frontline community today, that was not my first experience, growing up. My first experience was seeing the deep connection to land that people of color had, seeing this nature of self-determination and resiliency that existed in rural communities, seeing the appreciation of the earth that people illustrated in how they interacted, people who were farmers, people who grew community gardens, people who were landowners for generations at a time where Black land ownership and involvement of Black farmers is on the decline. I grew up with that and being exposed to that as the norm. Juxtaposed to that, as I kind of left home, entered my academic career, and also my activist career, I started to have some experiences that demonstrated the potential devastation that communities like where I was from was experiencing. One of my earliest critical moments was visiting a small town called Navassa, North Carolina, right outside of Wilmington. Don't know if any of you all have heard of it. But this came at a time where I was in undergrad. I was pursuing my physics degree, but really wrestling with this notion of, how would this benefit communities and people that I cared about? How would that translate? An opportunity actually came up to participate in what was known as the North Carolina Poverty Tour, which was hosted by the North Carolina NACP and the UNC Center of Poverty at that time. The UNC Center of Poverty has since been erased from the books, but that's a whole nother conversation through some acts by the Board of Governors, but that's a different conversation. But this tour came together to basically put a lens on the stories of some of the most impacted poor communities across the state of North Carolina. And it was in direct response of one of the state legislators at the time, I believe it was in 2011, 2012, going on public record and saying that they did not believe extreme poverty existed in the state of North Carolina, just dismissing the realities of a couple million people. So these two organizations came together and said, we are not going to allow what we call attention violence, the erasure of the reality of the most impacted among us. We're going to go to the most abject regions of poverty, tell their stories, and bring them back as impetus as why we must prioritize equity and justice in our public policy. So one of the stops, of course, was Navassa, North Carolina, that small town called outside of Wilmington. And Navassa is a beautiful landscape and area. I mentioned I'm a country boy, so it hits me right here, but it is a community that has historically been a community of color, Black community. It is just an amazing illustration of rolling green space, forestry, just the beauty that Eastern North Carolina has to offer. The Cape Fear River cuts through the community and serves as a natural deep sea port. However, the community that is present has not actually been able to develop that land and take advantage of it because a wood processing plant came in and poisoned over 600 acres of land with some of the worst carcinogens known to man years ago. The site is still polluted. The site is still listed on the federal registry of Superfund sites. It's a clear indication of environmental injustice and pollution. And that was really my first slap in the face moment as to the devastations of environmental injustice, seeing how, one big industry could come in and disrupt, right, completely the ability of a community to self-determine and lock them into a future just off of one bad policy decision. I later on went on to law school, where I focused on environmental law and energy policy, and began to see that the encroachment that was very much within the realm of environmental injustice through the local fights for clean water, clean air, and a right to the public participatory process was directly connected to my emerging knowledge of the coming climate crisis, that the climate crisis served as a multiplier to make worse existing environmental injustices. And through that work, I really committed myself to trying to be a bridge on, advancing community solutions and advancing voices of communities as we talk about these issues. So let me see if I can hear. I wanted to just dive in very quickly and just using the chat. Have any of you all heard of this concept of the 3 E's of sustainability, also known as the triple bottom line? So this is a notion that came about in the 1960s. The triple bottom line was coined in 1994, but the 3 E's of sustainability representing a matrix that formed what is a sustainable practice. And those are economy, which focused on economic growth and efficiency; ecology, which focused on environmental and ecological protections; and then equity, which focused on social justice and economic opportunity.
Are you going through your slides? Because we're not seeing changing slides.
I am. Did that not come up?
If you play from the start, maybe that'll, and then you can. We're just seeing the first slide, the title slide.
Are you still seeing the first slide now?
Yes.
Okay, here, let me pause share. Thank you.
With this slides, not the one with the notes, but if you have the slides minimized, or is behind other tabs and you're on Zoom, it doesn't move on.
How about now?
That's better. There you go.
Okay, let me try to advance. Is it working?
Yes, that's working.
Okay, perfect. All right. So backing up. Yeah. So this concept of the 3 E's of sustainability, also known as the triple bottom line, as it was coined in 1994, but focused on these 3 pillars of economy, ecology, and equity, as defined here. Historically, equity has oftentimes gotten the short end of the stick when we talk about sustainable policy, because there has been a prioritization of either protecting the environment at all costs, lowering emissions, or protecting the economic growth, right, and benefit. And equity has oftentimes been pushed to the side or placed on the back burner because just there has not been a critical mass of scholarship until recently to really push this issue. So within the 3 E's of sustainability, there are what is known as 3 conflicts that really have to be thought about. And I bring this up because this kind of centers around my thinking. One, the conflict between equity and environmental protection is what is known as the development conflict, which is essentially this tension where communities that have traditionally been on the short end of the stick in receiving environmental protections, receiving the benefits of the environment, such as access to green space and access to water resources, often are in direct conflict with the need for those same communities to be served by development, by actual urban development, the notions of city development and placing amenities. At the intersection of economy and environment is something known as the resource conflict. That conflict really being described as the tension between businesses or industry who need the environment to be protected and sustained because of the utilization of those natural resources through which they provide their goods, and the tension of encumbered economic growth and consumption, using up those natural resources to produce as much as they can. And the tension between equity and the economy pillar has been what is known as the property conflict, where those businesses which have an interest in providing goods for the communities in which they are embedded also are tasked with the notion of protecting their interests in property by not necessarily engaging with that community as equitably as one might hope. It's really this notion of who owns, right? Who owns the resources that are kind of at the intersection of these conversations. And so these 3 E's of sustainability are questions that we really have to take seriously, as we think about climate and environmental solutions, and especially making sure that equity is put on equal footing, just as much as the pillars of economy and environment, knowing that at the intersection of all 3 is where we actually get solutions that are truly sustainable. They are green, they are profitable, and they are fair. So in my work, we make sure to really define, what equity means. Just dropping in the chat, if you all could, or raising your hand, what do folks think equity means? Maybe just shouting some words out.
Giving everybody what they need instead of giving everybody the same thing.
Great. That's a great definition. Others. Two more.
Does that definition resonate with everybody? Okay. Amina said nuance justice.
I'm sorry. I saw one in the chat. I'm having a hard time hearing you all. Y'all forgive me. Nuance justice. I like that. Amina, do you care to elaborate? I know you're on Zoom.
It was sort of a remix of the words that one of my classmates said. I'm sorry, I don't know who said that exactly, but sort of paying attention to the individual needs of individual communities or persons or groups and distributing justice in that way.
Great. I love talking with a class like you all that are of the generation where this has been front of mind, because you all can imagine the frustration we've had in really trying to define this out. A lot of times, folks, as you see here, think equity is simply fairness, right? It's simply treating everyone fairly. Well, what does that mean? Sometimes people try to define equity as equality, treating everyone the same. Equity is actually a deep analytical exercise, as many of you all said, that looks at whether all people have similar rights and opportunities, basic needs to maintain an acceptable quality of life. Equity, very clear here, is separate and distinct from simply inclusion, just getting people in the room or a part of the conversation. It is also different than treating everyone the same way. Equity at its core must be a process and a pathway, not only an outcome, and it has to take into account the individual needs, individual scenarios of people in the conversation. So now some quick definitions of course, environmental justice. So the EPA defines environmental justice as the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of all people, regardless of race, regardless of color, regardless of national origin or income, with respect to the development, implementation, and enforcement of environmental laws, regulations, and policies. Environmental justice is achieved when everyone enjoys the same degree of protection from environmental and health hazards, as well as equal access to the decision-making process to have a healthy environment in which to live, to learn, and to work. So this slide, we have a little typing error here, but it's just a quick timeline of the environmental justice movement. We are right now in 2022 in the 40th year anniversary of the 1982 Warren County protests, a set of protests right here in Northeastern North Carolina that is actually cited as being the birthplace of the national environmental justice movement. Within that history, because we are in that symbolic moment, and as we see massive action by government and the private sector on addressing climate solutions, it is critical that we understand and hear the wisdom that community leaders gave us in how we must define and advance environmental justice. So in addition to the EPA definition, I would encourage each of you to look at the resources, the 17 principles of environmental justice, which is a resource that was actually put together by community advocates at the 1991 First People of Color convening in Washington, D.C., who were responding to an urgent need for advancing environmental justice on a national stage. Now, we said environmental justice is distinct from climate justice. It's related, but it's distinct. Climate justice is a framing that makes the connection between the climate and environmental crisis and other socioeconomic crises. Climate justice forces an understanding that the climate crisis is an environmental issue, but it is also a social issue. It is also an economic issue. It is also an issue that is a matter of race. It is also a gender issue. It is also a disability issue. This lens focuses on the root causes of the climate crisis, including an economy that is heavily dependent on the exploitation of fossil fuels, deeply embedded structural racism, and other social inequities. This lens calls for solutions that center the priorities and the voices of the most impacted communities among us. There are key components of a climate justice narrative: the people-centered, acknowledgement of disproportionate impacts, and identifying of intersecting oppressions and issues. So when we talk about the urgency of equity in current climate initiatives and the need to highlight these concepts of environmental and climate justice, there's a history that really speaks to us and makes us needing to understand this present moment. The first is that when we think about communities, frontline communities, fence line communities, poor communities, communities of color, communities in rural America, that are often being hit the worst by current environmental and climate impacts, we have to recognize that that is not happenstance. That is not simply a function of those communities being prone to simply be impacted or to be devastated. The reality is that these current realities of impact are the results of bad policy decisions that have often been rooted in structural racism, political exploitation, and economic exclusion that have locked entire communities into highly impacted, highly exposed locations for generations. I often say that we must think of frontline communities not as victims, but as communities that have been victimized because of the social disparities that we as a society have perfected over the generations. And I say perfected, again, because it's been intentional bad policy decisions. So take the issue of redlining, for example. Folks familiar with the concept of redlining? I can't see hands, but.
A lot of nods. Yep.
Okay, a lot of nods. Great. So most of us understand what the policy of redlining was, right? It was a policy coming out of the New Deal that explicitly made it difficult for communities of color to receive. I'm sorry, can you all hear me? I'm getting some bad feedback. Is that on my end?
We can hear you.
Okay, so redlining was a policy during the New Deal that made it explicitly difficult for communities of color to receive loans to actually purchase homes. There was a document entitled the Underwriting Manual that established explicitly segregationist policies in who would receive home ownership loans versus communities that would not. And it looked at communities that had high populations of African Americans, high populations of immigrants, and essentially labeled those communities red as being unsafe for lenders to provide financial loans. This had a devastating effect in that it kneecapped kneecapped the ability of Black Americans to access home ownership and to begin the process of generating generational wealth through home ownership, which was the majority way that Americans, white Americans, generated the generational wealth. Connecting it to our environmental concern, the underwriting manual that I mentioned also mentioned that highways would be an effective tool in separating incompatible racial groups, basically prioritizing segregation. This led to the deployment of our national highway system in a way that completely bulldozed communities of color across the nation. Communities like Freedmanstown in Texas, communities like in the Midwest. Entire communities were bulldozed for the preferred placement of our national highway system. This placement of the national highway system allowed the beginning encroachment of heavy industry into these same communities because industry was looking for places to place their polluting infrastructure that were both near these channels of commerce in the form of the national highway system, but also did not have the economic or political power to offer significant resistance. And because of the earlier ramifications of the kneecapping of the ability to generate economic power by entire communities through the redlining policies, these happen to be communities of color, immigrant communities, poor communities. Once this encroachment happened, we saw that it then manifested in what we still see today, the beginning of generational legacy pollution, the beginning of disproportionate health outcomes, the beginning of disparate exposures to pollution, to GHG emissions, to cancer-causing and asthma-causing chemicals. And all of this was connected to one bad policy decision. We also see this further manifest in the fact that this exacerbated the denial of access to green space. Of course, because industry, the facilities, the pipelines, the refineries, those are not comprised of greenery. Those are comprised of concrete and metal. And so we see the further exacerbation of the denial of access to green space by communities of color. We see the continued placement of our fossil fuel infrastructure in these same communities, because once one industry encroaches, more often than not, it is easier for other polluting entities to follow. This is why there was a report that came out April of this year that demonstrated that historically redlined communities were 200% more likely, possessed 200 times more the number of oil and gas wells than non-redline communities. And again, all of these disparities connect back to one bad policy decision. When we talk about the continued impact, so there are 3 maps here. We do a quick mapping exercise in our work. And I would ask you all just to pay attention to any trends that you all may happen to see. So this is just a simple map of census data that looks at the percent of Black or African-American population for non-metropolitan counties. If you're a student of history or a student of sociology, you notice the hot spotting here. And this refers to an area known as, does anyone know it? What this area refers to? What did I hear?
The Black Belt.
The Black Belt, exactly. The Black Belt. And now, did you all know that the Black Belt, it doesn't refer to the concentrations of African Americans or Black people, it actually refers to the soil in these regions. That because the soils were heavily carbonized, the soil was deep, it was rich, and it was Black. Now, if you're a student of public health, you also know that this region is unfortunately known as something called, anyone know? The stroke belt. The stroke belt, having some of the worst cases of stroke and health disparities in the country. But pay attention to this region. Now, similar census data, and this just shows the percent of population living in persistent poverty being defined as an area where a child born to a two-parent household has a greater than 50% chance in ending up in a worse economic position than their parents. And if you pay attention, you see some very similar hotspotting right here in these areas. You also see the emergence of hotspots in the Midwest and the West Coast. We found that that corresponds to Hispanic communities as well as indigenous and tribal reservations. But pay attention here. And now this next set is data that is usually or is not often shown in conjunction with the first two data sets. This map indicates the frequency of billion-dollar weather and climate disasters for the last 40 years. And if you look at this hotspotting, you see that it is very eerily overlaid with the hotspots for poverty, as well as the hotspots for concentrations of communities of color. And so in my work, we say that this data actually tells us a story that we all subconsciously know, but it's really important to pull out and illustrate. When we talk about the current front lines of the climate crisis, the people, the community, the places that are being hit first and worst, the data shows us that they are largely communities in the southeastern United States. They are largely poor communities. They are largely communities of color. So when we are thinking about the low-hanging fruit in terms of climate and environmental action, it's incumbent that we think about how to prioritize the needs and increasing resilience of these communities, these very communities. This is a quote that I like to use by Van Jones in The Green Collar Economy. And he talks a little bit about this by saying the green economy, the emerging green economy, should not just be about reclaiming thrown away stuff. It should be about reclaiming thrown away communities. It should not just be about recycling things to give them a second chance. We should also be gathering up people and giving them a second chance. In other words, we should use the transition to a better energy strategy as an opportunity to create a better economy and a better country all around. Now, what are some of the opportunities when we think about those overlays, but also think about the energy transition in front of us? Well, the first is that when we think about the market, the global market for our clean energy transition, it is on a scale of between 56 to 131 trillion dollars. 56 to 131 trillion dollars. Comparatively, the entire Internet of Things in 2020 was valuated at only, in quotation marks, $8 trillion. So when we think about the harm that has been through intentional bad policy decisions forced onto these frontline communities, this moment of energy transition represents a generational opportunity, generational amount of capital to invest in these communities to redress some, not all, but some of the harm that they have experienced. There's also opportunities to unleash local economies through clean jobs and clean businesses. Thomas Lyson found that more diverse businesses were better for workers and communities. There was a study that showed that counties with more small and local businesses, more diverse businesses, were better in almost every metric, from health and education to crime rates, children's health, citizen satisfaction, and more. There's an opportunity to scale climate solutions at the community level. When we look at the UN Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, every iteration of that report carves out a critical role for community scale solutions, saying that we do not get to global solutions to the climate crisis without the key role of communities and frontline communities on the ground. Community scale solutions have also been shown in numerous studies to generate larger benefits when done in conjunction with other development activities. So 2 critical considerations for how we could operationalize equity in urban initiatives, climate initiatives. The first is that we must ensure that solutions, that initiatives that we propose to the climate crisis are accessible, meaning that we must look at initiatives that facilitate expanded deployment of clean energy technology to communities that have historically been locked out of the conversations. We must make sure that the realities of BIPOC communities, low and moderate income communities, rural communities, communities on the front lines of extractive industry are not left out of the equation. And when we think about accessibility, we must recognize that that has to be a conversation that is deeper than treating these areas as nascent markets for us to tap into and benefit from. We must treat these communities as not only as a new pool of customers to be tapped into, but as partners, as co-creators, as visionaries in the emerging clean economy. We have to identify deployment strategies that articulate clear co-benefits for communities in the realm of economic opportunity, including wealth generation and ownership, environmental justice by addressing legacy pollution, and benefits for public health. We must also consider solutions that are equitable. There goes that word again. This looks at solutions that facilitate measurable gains in social equity while also achieving goals in emissions reduction. That, looks at those 2 pillars, 2 of the 3 pillars of sustainability, the ecology and environment through the emissions reduction, and the equity conversation. Equity, as we said, must be deeper than a conversation only on inclusion. It must be about equipping communities with the resources to take their place in the clean energy economy. Equity as a pathway must lead to self-determination for disadvantaged communities that have too often been forced into legacies of pollution, of disparity, of bad health outcomes, of racial discrimination. Equity must break through that. So some recommended reading for you all. The first is a book called A Terrible Thing to Waste, which by Harriet A. Washington, which goes into environmental racism and its assault on the American mind. The second is The Color of Law by Richard Rothstein, which really lays out a compelling narrative of the history of redlining and its effects, not only on home ownership and the racial wealth gap, but also on the emergence of these instincts of disparity in terms of pollution exposure. The third is a book called A New Reality by Jonas and Jonathan Salk. And the fourth is the 8th edition of the Justice, Equity, and Sustainability Volume 8 from MIT. This really goes into some of those creative solutions, as well as the triple bottom line of economy, ecology, and equity, and why it is so important for us to understand that history while making sure equity gets the proper attention that it historically has not. And I'll pause there for any questions before diving in to this part 2.
Anybody have any questions? Yes, I was gonna ask, can we get the slide after the, I think that we will recommend you report that's been out earlier this year. The 200 times specifically brought, if we get direct us to that report, I think we could probably like to do that.
I'm sorry, Cameron, if that was a question for me, it was not clear. Yeah.
Oh, no, it's just asking if you can share the slides afterwards. And you mentioned the report, where you said the 200 times statistic. I was wondering if you could share that with us so we can share.
Yes, we can share that link. Yep. Mhm.
If you have any questions, I think you can move forward.
I see Amina had her hand raised, I believe.
Oh, Amina, I'm so sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry, just a really quick question. I was gonna ask you if you had any suggestions for North Carolina specific authors around environmental justice or lived experiences thereof.
For North Carolina specifically, I do not. What I look at right now that is pretty big on my radar in North Carolina is the emerging state policy around these issues. So like Executive Order 80, which of course was North Carolina's commitment to a clean energy economy, and then Executive Order 246, which was North Carolina's commitment to building a clean and equitable state future, which for the first time kind of identified these intersections between social equity and climate impact. Those two are really good starts, and it informs a lot of state policy that is currently being discussed, including our state carbon plan, our clean energy plan, our clean transportation plan, that all have space for this conversation around how in solutions that, address our environmental crisis, we're also thinking about community impact. So I would really encourage you, to take a look there. And then, of course, the 17 principles of EJ, which I mentioned at the top, it is not North Carolina specific, but again, much of the leadership that was at that convening was present at the Warren County protests in 1982. And a couple of highlights of folks, just veteran activists in the state who are doing work right now include Donna Chavis, include Sherry White Williamson, include Crystal Cavalier, who's an Afro-Indigenous woman who was very much at the front lines of opposing the Atlantic Coast Pipeline and Mountain Valley pipelines. So.
Thank you so much.
Yep. Great. Now, very briefly, because I see the time, I just wanted to run through what we are looking to do at Rural Beacon Initiative. And of course, Rural Beacon Initiative, I founded in 2019 with the belief that looking at the data, Southern BIPOC communities had to be at the helm of this notion of a just transition. And so we look at climate investment with the lens of equity, and we believe in this mantra of solutions that are good for the land, but also good for the people. Like I said, we envision communities in the Southeast at the forefront of the just transition to a clean energy economy. And we catalyze this through over a decade of cultivation of community relationships and a proven track record of community advocacy and consulting on climate solutions. Why? We believe we are community embedded and connected. We are experienced in achieving concrete results, advancing equity and environmental justice through deployed projects. We have partnered with some of the leading folks in industry. We're mission focused and opportunity driven, and we've embraced this vision of the triple bottom line that we talked about: equity, ecology, and economy. So a little bit about my background. This is our team who has really come together and helped build out this work. This is some of the attention that we've received. So we've been featured in PayPal's Rising Leader Series, as well as NextGen's 30 Under 30 Young Black Changemakers. We were also recognized by North Carolina Governor Cooper as one of the Black STEM leaders in 2022. This is much bigger than any individual. I'll show this slide. It is never about, myself or my work alone. This is about the team's work and the organization's work, as well as, sharing with you all that there is a real thirst in the larger society for solutions that are centering community impacts as we build towards that just and equitable transition. A little bit more about our work. One of the things that is unique to us as an organization is that we try to go as deep on this issue as we can. We really try to use our platform as experts in this field to help drive some of the visioning that is happening to, again, give that notion of equity the platform that it historically has not had. So we published several thought pieces that seek to drive the intersections between clean energy deployment and racial equity. We look to make sure to inform policy that is seeking to lower our state greenhouse gas emissions, but making sure they don't do harm for low-income and environmental justice communities, like the current conversation around the regional greenhouse gas initiative that the state is currently having, whether or not to join that. Looking at ways that other states have creatively joined that initiative, but also prioritized environmental justice by reinvesting some of the RGGI-generated revenues into frontline communities. So we really try to use our platform to push those innovative solutions. Talked a little bit about our current work. Wanted to dive here in the Vera Brown Farm Project, which of course is one of our deployed projects. So we look at the Vera Brown Farm Project as a case study of how to use integrated capital to address Black land loss and support regenerative development in Eastern North Carolina. The Vera Brown Farm vision is a unique opportunity to preserve a historic site and address family land loss in rural Eastern North Carolina. So this is a 52-acre site in Eastern North Carolina that actually sits in a historic freemen community, not freed, free. There's a distinction. This is a community that the chain of ownership for free people of color was never broken, a community that still exists today. This is a community of free people of color. A lot of people don't know that south of the Mason-Dixon line, these type of communities existed. And in North Carolina, we have our very own history of that. Free people of color who were entrepreneurs, who worked the land, who held on to the land, and really have kind of maintained that legacy. We see this as a development of a unique partnership and integrated package that has benefits for land access, increasing diversity in farm systems, and environmental and climate sustainability, and is scalable and replicable. So one thing that is important with this project is that we are working with a unique team, a community development financing institution, as well as an accelerator group out of Durham, to put together the financing that we could replicate this product with other distressed BIPOC landowners. And of course, we see a multi-year, multi-tier sustainability project with numerous potential revenue streams and environmental benefits. Very quickly, this site will sit at the intersection of regenerative agriculture, sustainable agroforestry, and agrivoltaics, the placement of solar panels in conjunction with certain crops that demonstrate clear benefits. And we are using this to demonstrate what is actually possible, again, in an area that has traditionally been seen as the front lines of impacting climate change. This just represents a quick, diagram of some of what we are looking to accomplish. Of course, we're going to have an organic market garden. We're looking at deploying longleaf pine in the sustainable agroforestry sense, regenerative animal agroforestry to help heal the soil that has been farmed in traditional production with heavy pesticides and chemicals. So we want to help heal the soil. And then we also want to do a historic preservation of the homestead to serve as a housing site for the legacy, the oral histories that Cameron is working on from the community, and where people can come, an element of eco and agro-tourism. People can come hear about the legacy and the history of this community, but also be exposed to these new opportunities of economic development that can be done in rural America. Very quickly, we're working with one of our partners is the Alliance for Native Seed Keepers. They are a husband-wife team that are working on preserving 1,000-year-old indigenous seeds. And we are working with them to see how our site can help expand their capacity for their seed saving project. Talks a little bit about our collective goal. And I'll look at bullet 3 is that we work together. We all have land security and clean energy. We nourish ourselves with food as well as cultural celebrations. And we show that the elements of human existence, food production, energy, and where we exist can be done in a way that is truly sustainable with our surrounding environment. That is not only zero harm, but is actually net benefit when we talk about, again, that triple bottom line of economy, ecology and environment, and equity. So I'll stop there because I know we are coming up on time and take any quick questions.
You have any questions? I have a quick one. Just for context, guys, we really wanted to discuss their brown farm project because the hope is that you can go down there and select oral services. So beautiful, long-standing history of triracial communities. My understanding is like 300 years with land ownership, Indian ownership down there, and there's a pretty vast community of indigenous people sharing stories and connections. And we want to work with William over the course of the year to get y'all down there and speaking to the people in the virtual history project. So hopefully y'all are excited about that. I think the big piece for you, William, is where do you see that sort of oral history of storytelling as a critical point in this sort of environmental justice and climate justice work, giving some context to our students who are going to spend next year doing this sort of storytelling?
Yeah, community storytelling has always been a critical tool in the tool belt of environmental advocacy, especially around environmental justice. I mean, you know, communities at the beginning of the environmental justice movement, communities had for decades known that something was wrong in terms of what they were being exposed to and impacts that they were being faced. But at the time, you know, the federal government had not caught up into actually capturing the data that would demonstrate this. And so it was through the community storytelling exercise of the United Church of Christ report, Toxic Waste and Race, actually demonstrated that nationwide race was the biggest factor in terms of race instead of income was the biggest factor in terms of, you know, measuring a community's probability of being exposed to disproportionate levels of pollution. And that community storytelling exercise actually led to the implementation of Executive Order 12898. It actually led to the establishment of environmental justice protocols within the EPA. It actually led to the federal government beginning to look at the data and tracking, you know, many of the disproportionate chemical exposures that communities were seeking to get relief on. So community storytelling has always been a critical tool in terms of advancing environmental justice. From the human component, you know, when we talk about sustainability, I believe sustainability is not just about our environment, but it is also about our communities. And a piece of that is the culture, is these histories, is these stories that should be passed down generations to generations. You know, embedded in those stories and narratives are also the narratives of how people have understood their relationship with the land, how people, you know, have taken pride in this deep connection and being. You know, like we said, this is a community, a free community of color that has existed, you know, since before the Civil War. That story, you know, is something that needs to be sustained, that should not be lost, you know, especially as we are seeing, you know, the aging of the population, you know, and just needing that knowledge. So I think of sustainability in that aspect as well. And then finally, I think, you know, the community storytelling is so important as we look to the future, right? We are at a moment where it is critical that we inspire en masse other communities, other individuals to action, right? To think about, what does sustainability look like in their context? What does equitable climate solutions look like in their communities? We need a massive scaling up of innovation that is happening at the community level. And I firmly believe that the community storytelling exercises help to create the impetus for some of that.
You presented a really helpful overarching picture as well as a clear picture of why we should be focusing on environmental justice in the American South. as the purpose of this project, but also given some really helpful content for our students who are hoping we'll get to work with you over the course of the next year to contribute oral history to the Barber Brown Farm project. So thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us. And we'll please share your contact information. Again, so this is going to be an ongoing partnership, guys. You are going to have a lot of chances to keep learning. Please share your contact information if people have follow-up questions.
Sure, I just dropped in the chat. I don't know if everyone can see it, but I dropped my email. So feel free to email us at ruralbeaconinitiative@gmail.com or visit us, follow us on social media. Feel free to reach out there.
Thank you so much for joining us again, William. And we'll be in touch again about, he's going to be joining us on September 30th for a climate justice event. You guys can go attend. We're going to try to get y'all down to Piney Woods Reunion to the Barber Brown Farm project for a harvest festival that he's putting together. There's going to be a lot of fun stuff happening in partnership with William Barber III. So look out for his name again. Hopefully y'all are as excited as we are.
Thank you all so much. Thank you, Cameron. And again, really looking forward to engaging in the future with each of y'all. Thank y'all.
Thank you. Awesome, guys. Let me. Okay, so we have 20 more minutes left. I wanted to make sure that we run through the syllabus really quickly, and again, hopefully that gives y'all a really good sense for, I guess, the intention. Why is artist focused on specific?
No, I was just gonna say before I leave, I know that you mentioned Krista Cavalier. She's working at the Climate Justice House Force next Thursday.
We will share that information with all of you. And Crystal Cavalier will be speaking at the Climate Justice House for the next week.
Yeah, next Thursday.
Wow, okay. What's happening next Thursday? Thank you, Ariel. I have that information, so I can share it with everybody. But y'all probably saw there's a lot of cool climate justice and environmental justice stuff happening this semester. We're hoping to see all of you guys into that stuff and see if that can supplement the oral history work we're hoping to work on for the next year. Let me pull up share my screen for the people on Zoom. Yes, no. This is Sasha. She's not in the class. She works with the grad network, the EJ grad network here. Yeah, go by. Your grad student. Reach out to me. Bye. Bye. Okay, so y'all have probably already seen this syllabus. Our goal over the course of the next semester is that we can work with you guys to collect a number of stories, personal experiences, oral histories with communities in wherever you guys are interested in collecting those stories on history. We are going to be providing some guidance over the course of the semester. We'll be doing some environmental justice lectures and trainings and encouraging you guys to attend all of the events that are happening this semester around environmental justice, just to get you guys up to speed into the movement, the history, the context of which you're speaking to some of these community members in. And then we'll be shifting focus into more storytelling techniques, interviewing techniques, traditional oral history techniques, so that we can get everyone on the same level with how do you actually go to a person, sit down in conversation with them and get something that they would be proud to share out with people. Because that's the hope here. We are truly supporting other people and sharing their stories and experiences with a wider audience. It's not just within their community. Quick introduction. My name is Cameron. I am a Master of Public Policy candidate at the Stanford School. I focus on environmental policy, public sustainability, and environmental justice. I did a lot of environmental justice work here at UC undergraduate as well as I graduated last year. But the gist of it is I've done the science stuff, I've done the policy stuff, I've done the organizing, all of the events that are happening this fall, I'm organizing those. And I've done a lot of journalism as well. So if anyone wants to have conversations with me about the various ways to have impact as an environmentalist or environmental justice advocate, let me know. I'm totally deviating from that, and I am now working in consulting. So if you're interested in sustainability and consulting, I can talk about that too. I want to pass it off to Betsy and Eric that introduce themselves as the faculty leads for the project.
Thank you, Cameron. I'm Betsy Albright. I'm the associate professor of practice at the Nicholas School. And my work primarily focuses on post-disaster recovery in the U.S. and have been working with Erica's lead on an environmental justice project, a long-term 7 to 8 year project with Patrick Coleman Flowers, who is now a practitioner in residence at the Nicholas School, and her organization, Center for Rural Enterprise and Environmental Justice, or CREACH, and really look forward to working with you. I'm Erica Weinthal. I am a professor in the Nicholas School of the Environment. I'm also a secondary in public policy. I also have a secondary diploma in international studies. That's that program really well. And I also have a secondary diploma in sunshine. So I am affiliated with lots of parts of the university. I also chair the academic council, so if I seem a little bit scattered this semester, it's just because there's a lot going on. I am a political scientist by training. I work, my heavy foot in the field is at the global level. So I've worked on everything related to governance of the global environment. I don't know what to describe it. But I worked in the former Soviet Union. I worked in the Soviet and I also worked in the US. So, and it's what I said about working in the classroom.
And I'll just note, I think my first introduction to Betsy and Erica was taking Betsy's domestic environmental policy class and taking Erica's global environmental policy class. So they sort of complement each other. I also want to briefly introduce Danny sitting in the back. She's a grad student taking the class like the rest of you guys, but over the course of the semester, she will be sort of getting all feedback, developing a sort of case study on how this program goes so that other people can use it as a guide or a cautionary tale, it depends on what y'all tell her, for how to do this sort of community. So, I don't know if you want to.
That's true. I'm Jenny. I'm a second year PG at Stanford, and everything that you said that's what I'll be doing on this project. So I'm really focused on relationship building with all of you. Hopefully, build relationships with the comfortable coming to funding what you feel is working, what isn't working. We want all of that feedback. And other than that, I'm basically taking this course just like you all. So I'll be doing my own. Oh, Master's in Public Policy. So at Stanford, where we met in the courtyard the other day.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's the building. So Cameron and I both go there. Cameron does some environmental, and I do more social.
So we have 15 minutes here. I'm hoping that y'all really enjoyed William's presentation. Yes. Please do give us feedback on those things also, just so we can make sure the structure is moving forward in a way that is more conducive to y'all's success. I'm going to quickly run through the gist of the syllabus with the understanding that we are reserving some extra office hours immediately after class for people who have extra questions. So if you have time to stick around, you want to introduce yourself for those that you haven't met yet, and ask any additional questions. Please feel free to stick around. I'll also note that you guys did some quick intros during the presentation, but we wanted to take a little space on the PI, and we're going to be working off of the PI to further introduce yourself, provide a little bio. So there's going to be what is called a comments tab there. If you guys want to put a little bit about yourselves, your interests, why you joined the course, etc., in there, and explore the various connections you might have to each other. I think this is a really great networking and community building opportunity as much as it is educational for you. So putting that out there, because unfortunately we don't have the time today to just sit and get to know each other. there will likely be time for some of that in the future, but we sort of try to practice first day, keep you guys engaged. I hope you find interest in the project. So y'all have probably already seen this a lot. The gist of it is the EJ Oral History Project as a whole is a multi-dimensional storytelling project that combines oral history, journalism, podcasting research, the events that are happening this fall, all to create this larger space for environmental justice, storytelling, community building, and experience sharing. You guys, as Doc Connection students, are really hopping into the oral history component. We want to work with you over the course of the next 2 semesters, for those who can join us for both semesters, to train you guys in the parts of interviewing, perhaps dismantle any conceptions, preconceived notions you guys have about the way that we as students of this university representatives should be going out into community as researchers, as journalists, as storytellers, and just generally getting y'all up on environmental justice with the understanding that we're looking at environmental justice plays a bigger part in the university as a whole moving forward. Let's create some more environmental justice advocates at Duke while we're teaching you guys about oral history work. And people have specific questions about our protocol, the informed consent process, this idea of we're building. We're going to go over that in future classes. We want to make sure that we're dedicating time to explaining how informed consent works, how you are able to go into communities, take a person's story and ensure that they still have some ownership of it. So that we're not just extracting from communities for the sake of Duke as a university. That's the sort of historical exploitation we want to be avoiding as much as possible. But also getting y'all up. I know some people have expressed an interest in more of the sensitivity training and racial equity side to some of this work. So making sure everyone has that basic understanding of the movement of social justice and how she thinks like that's a socially conscious community. Any quick questions about overarching what the learning objectives are, what we are hoping you get out of this class, the purpose of this project, anything like that? I take silence as I completely understand everything, and I'm not going to come back to you later with like questions about.
Anyone who's just students about before?
Oh, has anyone done Bath Connections before? Anyone on Zoom? Christina for the win.
At some point, maybe next class, I know we're gonna run out today, we could maybe talk a little bit about that, just like the history. Yeah, just because that's like part of what Cameron is saying, like we want to be, the one thing I want to interject right now is we want you also, this whole project depends on you being fully engaged and having ownership over the projects that you work on. So this, you know, it's a very different type of learning environment. I don't know if that's how it works with the other one, but it is very student-centered and student-driven. The project teams only work in content who are here 100%. I can talk more about that, but I just want to make sure that that's very different than a traditional class.
I think that would be some very helpful context. I think for those who are able to attend the little gathering we had on Tuesday, I think it's very clear. Not only this is my first Bath Connection class, I've been here for 6 years, it's my first Bath class as well. But I am not a teacher. I am building the plane as we're flying with you guys, and I'm going to be relying upon each of you to convey your needs, what resources you need, but also to step up and really own the pieces, the oral history, the projects that we provide you, but also that you identify yourself. So I think that was very helpful. We can go over that a bit more. We'll have time next class. There's something in the chat. Oh, let's. No worries. Any questions from the Zoom people? Everything making sense. Okay. Beautiful. I sort of alluded to this earlier also. You guys should have received this Sakai invitation. Did people get that email? Email me if you didn't. I also know for a fact from Amina specifically, we need to work with UNC students to get them on the side. So I will connect with people who are not able to access it because they don't have a email address afterwards. But that's how we'll be doing most of our, okay, great. We'll be doing all of our things that way. Some of you asked the other day about the assignment that's due next week, the summer assignment you guys all right, which everyone is super low key. We didn't expect a term paper. Like put your thoughts on paper, grammar doesn't matter. We just want to get a sense for where your interests are. You can submit that via Sakai under the assignments tab. That'll be the way that we are accepting assignments. That'll also be a way that you guys can get to know each other, to exchange phone numbers, and we'll probably be sending emails unless people are opposed to Slack. And how do people feel about Slack every time they do work?
You just prompt me when I.
Like, no, yeah. Yep. You hate it, Victoria. The other people hate Slack. In the middle, okay, we don't have to use it then.
I feel like you feel more friendly.
Okay, we can.
No, we don't have to.
No, we'll stick with email for now, and these are the sort of logistics I think we can hammer out next week during our left speaker and next session. How does that sound for people?
And maybe just grab everybody's like phone numbers, something like you want to have a different way of reaching people.
Yeah. Let's do that.
Yeah, there's no reason now. Just like
This is an intro meeting. We'll handle logistics next week. You guys should have already done all of this reading over the summer. We just have to look at some of the assignments. We're going to be having y'all attend some of the events that are happening. All of them are listed out in the Sakai in their calendar. So if you are looking for the registration for them, you don't decide to find it. The hope is that each of you can write a one-page reflection on a topic in one of the events. Go to all of the events. You only have to write one page about one of the events. But we encourage you to come to all of them. Another note that we're going to have a trip up to Warren County on September 17th. William Barber alluded to this history. Warren County is considered the birthplace of the environmental justice movement, and this September is the 40th anniversary of the Warren County protest. We're going to have a commemorative march and torch passing ceremony on September 17th in Warren County, and we have an invitation to lead the march if y'all want to join me in doing that. So it's an optional opportunity. We have a bus ready for you guys, but like we would really love it if y'all could come. And if you are interested in being one of the people holding the banners, helping with, coming up with the chant, let me know if I'm doing that. I need some help. So the next bit is a mid-semester outline. We'll go over that in greater detail closer to when it's due. But the hope is that outside of us providing the opportunity to select all this, we have a system about what community issues regions you would want to go into to select all the food yourself. These can be places where you live. A lot of the times we have people going back to their hometown and selecting all the food that way. As long as it's in the American South, it's fair game. And we would love to get a better understanding of where you'd like to go, what you're doing, etc. There'll also be an interview guide, then we'll go over that as detail closer to its deadline. But part of conducting an interview is coming up with the questions and outlining the structure of your interview. So we're going to teach you guys how to develop it for you guys and then asking you to do so based on the topic that you're interested in. We'll also have an outreach strategy that we'll do at the very end of the semester. There's going to just have to be a draft, and we'll really launch into that outreach strategy in the springtime. That's with the hope that outside of y'all collecting oral history, you can identify additional opportunity or resource that your community could use around an environmental justice issue. We have some people who are going to be creating like curricula in conjunction with collecting oral history so that the community can educate itself on the issue. That's just one example. So, thank you for pointing that out. Black is lovely. Say black is the worst. Oh, you guys. Registration. Oh, what I said about registration, I believe that was for events. if you go on to Kai, and I mean, you don't have to Kai yet, I was gonna do the event. That's where everyone can register for all of the environmental justice events that are happening on campus this semester. So that wasn't a really big point. I was just pointing it out. If you guys wanted to attend some of the cool stuff. And you're required to attend at least one. Any other questions? Amina, did that cover your point? Yep. Okay. Yeah, really is here. I'm rushing. Yes. Thanks.
You're a lot more anonymous, but in terms of like where these oral histories will end up, like are they published or is that something that like certain things like that?
We did not go over it. That will be in conversation with whoever is speaking to. If they determine that they would like it more widely published, even housed in Duke Library, we have a partnership with Duke Library to house these oral histories perpetuity. So they have a permanent place to live, even if they an external website we create dies or something, we forget to remove the domain or something. We will also have a special web page for the entire DJ Oral History project that includes the oral history, the journalism, project, everything. And that will be a more public facing website that will include can exist on because we are interested in doing that. But I think the biggest question is, once you're in conversation with the community, what do they want done with it? Because it's more sense to try to get it into a local library or a local community college if they have the access to it, or are they open to youth housing it long term? These are all bits that we're going to get to in greater detail when we're actually at the oral history collection point. That's part of your outreach strategy, actually. It's not only determining what additional resources you can find for people, but how you're going to connect the oral history to where people want their oral history. Any other questions? Did I miss something with that? Is there a final for this? No. Okay. Your final is your outreach strategy. Okay. And it's a drag. We're not really grading you. If you notice in the Kai, most of it's pass fail. Turn it in and you get a pass. So we're still expecting quality work again. But there, it's really going to depend upon y'all to make sure you're taking ownership, that you're doing the work essentially. Go out into the community and have a conversation effectively. But these assignments are kind of arbitrary. They're just little points along the timeline to help you in your progress as well.
Part of this, minimum, right? But part of this too is having clear expectations of each other in the room, so that you can turn to your classmates, teammates, to know that they will also hold up their part of the bargain, their commitment to the work. And so a lot of this is just navigating and using social contracts amongst us all, that we're here as a collective with a similar set of goals, but we may carve out different projects along the way.
We have it through there. Thank you for that. With that last point, Erica. Again, we're here if anyone has any burning questions. This has been an unconventional first day. I encourage you all to take a look through the syllabus and come back next time with questions. We can get to the actual color-coded bit next time too. And a reminder that your summer assignments are due. I think I made it before class next week, because our hope is you guys can talk through them a little bit. If you want to get to know your interest. Thank you. Have a lovely weekend, all. We met in person. Okay, good. Okay. Really quick. Thank you. Make sure, is everyone on Zoom okay? Oh, don't leave it. Okay, cool. Thank you, Amanda. Let me stop.